If you're new to Davinci Resolve, you might not know this, but the Fairlight page is a fully functioning DAW. And being a DAW, there are a lot of different things you can do with your audio, including multiple ways to control the volume of your audio clips. Let's talk about it. Before we get into some of the more professional level techniques for adjusting your audio volume, it's probably a good idea to cover the basics of adjusting the volume of both the individual clips and the overall tracks in your project. Let's jump into Davinci Resolve and take a look. All right, we are here in the Fairlight page of Davinci Resolve. I've got a couple of tracks here. We've got the yellow track, which is all of my dialogue. It's labeled VO for voiceover, and I've got my music track, which is the green clip and the green track. And when it comes to changing volume, there's a couple basic ways to do it. Let's take a look at how to control the volume or change the volume of an individual clip first. It's really, really easy. If we take a look at our clip, we'll see this thin white line going across the clip. We've got it on both the left and the right channel, and we've got it on each one of these dialogue clips. And in order to change the volume of an individual clip, all we have to do is grab that line. So we'll mouse over it until we have an arrow above it and an arrow below it, and we'll just click and bring it down. And you'll see when I'm doing it on a stereo track, both the left and the right are controlled, so it's all happening at the same time. Let's undo that. The other way to change the volume of an audio clip is to select the clip and open up your inspector, and you'll see volume right here at the top. We can go ahead and adjust the volume, and you'll see the waveform is changing as I'm adjusting the volume. Really, really easy. And to reset it back to 0, we can just double click. Now let's say you wanted to change the volume of an entire track. That's usually the case when you have multiple clips on a single track and you want to change the volume of all of them at the same time. There's a couple ways we can do this. The first way is to select the track and then come into your inspector and you can adjust the volume. And one thing to note here is no matter what I do with this volume slider here in the inspector, the waveform isn't going to change because we are not changing the volume of the clip. We're changing the volume of the overall track. And again, to reset it to 0, we can just double click on volume and we're back up to 0. Another place on the track where you can adjust the volume is this little box right here where it says 0.0. That's the volume reading. And if we click on that and we drag down or up, we can adjust the volume just like that. Really, really easy. And then the last place to adjust track volume is right here in your mixer. If you don't see your mixer in the Fairlight page, you can just come up here to the top right and you can turn that on and off. But you can use this mixer, this fader right here, and you can turn the track volume up or down. And the last thing that we should look at here is normalization. Normalization is a way to adjust the volume of a single clip or multiple clips to a specific loudness level. It's really, really easy to do. What we're going to do is we're going to select all of my dialogue clips and we're going to right click and we're going to come down to normalize audio levels. And if you take a look at this drop down box, you're going to see a lot of different options. We're not going to worry about all those right now. It's just different parameters depending on what you are editing for. We're typically going to stick with the ITUR BS 1770-4, and that's going to allow us to normalize for loudness while at the same time limiting our peak. The thing we really need to worry about is this relative or independent. If we choose relative, it's going to take a look at all of the clips that we have highlighted and it's going to adjust them all the same amount, so the overall loudness is where it's supposed to be. If we choose independent, it's going to take a look at all of our clips separately, and it's going to adjust each one separately so each individual clip hits the right loudness level. Now, if you have dialogue on a track and you are normalizing dialogue, I will always suggest to use relative. That way you don't have one clip that's one loudness and then the other one is a lot quieter and then the next one's a lot louder, that's going to be a mess. So I will always choose relative and then adjust manually from there. So we have relative, we have our target loudness level at -17 LKFS. We have our target level as -2 dB, and we're going to hit normalize. And you'll see if we select on our tracks, you'll see that in our inspector, our volume has gone up to 2.1. Same thing with this one and this one. Pretty simple, right? Now it's time to get into the fun stuff. Whenever you're in a situation where you need to adjust your volume multiple times on the same track, you basically have three options: keyframing, automation, and listening. Keyframing is a fully manual way of telling Davinci Resolve when you want the volume of a clip or a track to change, and it's pretty easy to do. Let's jump back into Davinci Resolve. Okay, we're back in Fairlight, and let me just run over the situation here. We've got a voiceover track with some dialogue clips in it, and we've got a music track with a music clip in it. And the goal of all of the exercises that we're doing today is the same. We're going to make the volume of the music go down while we're talking and go back up while we're not talking. And the first way we're going to do this is with keyframing. Keyframing is super simple. It gives you a lot of fine control, and there's a couple different ways we can do it. The first way we're going to do it is by adding keyframes directly on our audio clip. Super easy, everything. We don't have to open the inspector or anything. In fact, let's just go ahead and close out our inspector so we have a little bit more room to work with. Now, I want my audio to start fading about 1 second before I start talking. Let's go ahead and zoom in just a little bit here. And what we're going to do is place our playhead at the beginning of our dialogue clip. We're going to hold down Shift and hit the left arrow. That's going to bring our playhead back exactly 1 second. From there, all we have to do is mouse over our little volume control line on our clip. We're going to bring it right where that playhead is, and we're going to hold down Alt, and we're going to click on that little white line, and that's going to add a keyframe. See that little dot? That's a keyframe. Next thing we're going to do is bring our playhead back to the beginning of the clip. We're going to hold down Alt. Again, we're going to mouse over our playhead right over that white line, and we're going to click again. And then we're going to do this on the other side of the clip as well. So let's move to the end of the clip. We will add a keyframe there, and we'll go forward 1 second by holding down Shift and hitting the right arrow on our keypad, and we'll hold down Alt and click that white line right where the playhead is to add our last keyframe. And then all we need to do is mouse over that white volume control line on our audio clip, and we're going to click, and we're just going to drag it down. We'll say we're going to bring it down to about -14 dB. Let's bring it back, give it a listen, and see what we've got going on. When I think back to my childhood, you know what I remember the most? The summer. That sounds good to me. Next thing we're going to do is add some more keyframes around this dialogue clip, but this time we're going to use the inspector. So let's go ahead and bring our playhead to the beginning of the next clip. Again, we're going to go back 1 second by holding down Shift and clicking on the left arrow of our keypad, and we're going to open up our inspector. Now, nothing here is showing up because we don't have any audio clips selected, so let's go ahead and select our audio clip, and now we can see our volume controls. Now, it's really easy to use the inspector to set a keyframe. All we need to do in this volume area, right to the right of the volume slider, you'll see this little diamond. If we click that, that will turn red, indicating that there is a keyframe underneath the playhead. And if we come back to our clip and take a look, you'll see little white dot, that is a keyframe. And the cool thing about using the inspector to add keyframes and control your keyframes is that once you set this first one, anytime you change the volume, you are going to add a keyframe automatically. So the only time you need to click this diamond again is if you are, one, deleting a keyframe, or if you're adding a keyframe as a placeholder, saying, hey, we're going to start the next adjustment here. and we're going to end it somewhere else. So let's go ahead and move to the next place where we are going to adjust the volume, which is right at the beginning of our clip. And we'll go ahead and check that box, or select that box so our numbers are highlighted, and we're going to bring our volume down to -14. And we'll click enter, and you'll see we've got a new keyframe. We come back to the end of that clip, come into our inspector, we'll set a placeholder keyframe right there by clicking on the diamond in the inspector, and then hold down Shift, press the right arrow on our keypad to move forward 1 second. And if we double click volume, that's going to bring it back up to 0, and it will add an additional keyframe. So if we play that back, we should see another volume adjustment. I would spend hours outside with my friends. It didn't matter what we were doing, as long as we were together. That's perfect, but that is not. Now, let's say for whatever reason you wanted to delete a keyframe. Maybe you added one accidentally and you don't need it. That's really, really easy to deal with. All we have to do is select a keyframe on our clip, and we can hit backspace on our keyboard, or you can navigate through your keyframes right here where our little keyframe logo is, or our little diamond. We can just hit these arrows to the right or left of our keyframe indicator, and that will navigate us through our keyframes. When we get to the one that we want to delete, all we have to do is click the little diamond, and the keyframe will go bye-bye, and we're good to go. By the way, the music that I'm using for today's video, that's from today's sponsor, Artlist. Artlist has a huge selection of stock assets for video editors, and I'm not just talking about music. They've got sound effects, footage, effects, project templates, and even plugins that can help take your video projects to the next level. Oh, and an NLE. Did I mention that they have an NLE? Artlist's AI-powered search filters make it super easy to find what you're looking for, and they're constantly adding new stuff to their site, so it never feels stale or out of date. Artlist has a plan to meet any budget, including plans with an unlimited license that allows you to use their assets anywhere, at any time, on any project. So if you're looking for a piece of music or footage or whatever else you might need to finish your next video, click the link and check out Artlist today. If you sign up using that link, you'll get 2 free months on top of an annual subscription. Oh, and you'll be helping to support this channel, so, you know, win-win. Thanks so much to Artlist for sponsoring this video and for continuing to support creators like me. And with all that being said, let's talk about automation. Automation is a lot like keyframing, but the keyframes happen automatically, hence the name. Basically, when you're using automation, Davinci Resolve is recording the movement of your audio sliders and then adjusting the volume automatically when you play the video back. Oh, and volume isn't the only thing that you can automate either, but that's for another video entirely. For now, let's jump into Davinci Resolve and take a look at how to automate your volume. Okay, we're still in Fairlight. We've still got our voiceover track with our dialogue clips. We've still got our music track with our music clip, and the goal is still the same. Bring the volume of the music down while we're talking and back up while we're not. And this time, instead of using keyframes, we're going to use automation. Automation is basically the process of recording your audio fader movements, which will tell Davinci Resolve, hey, when you get to this point, bring the volume down. When you get to this point, bring it back up. It gives you more fine control over your volume, but it does require a steadier hand, and it's a little bit more of a complicated setup. So with all of that out of the way, let's start setting this up. First thing we need to do is enable automation in the Fairlight page. To do that, we're going to click this symbol right here. It's got 2 keyframes, line going through it, and a little on-off switch. We select that, and it'll turn red, and we now have automation enabled. If we want to get into our automation settings, we can go right next to that on-off switch. You'll see the little keyframe symbol with a settings gear. Click on that, and now we can basically say, this is what our automation is going to do. Like I said, you can automate a lot of different stuff, but we're currently just going to automate our fader. We're also going to make sure that when we stop recording our automation, we are going to hold our current volume. We're not going to bring it back to our original volume. We are going to hold our current volume. And we need to make sure that we are writing our automation. We are not trimming. Trimming is basically adjusting an automation that you already did. This is brand new from scratch. We are writing our automation. Touch, don't even worry about that. Leave it off. We don't need to worry about that. So now that we have automation enabled in Fairlight, now that we have our automation settings set up, we can close out our settings, give us a little bit more room to work with. And now we need to make sure that our track is enabled for automation. To do that, we are going to come down to our music track. If you don't see this drop-down box or this keyframe symbol, it's probably because you need to expand your track. So expand your track and you'll be good to go. Next thing we need to do is change this drop-down box from none to fader level. That's going to show our fader level bar. It's basically the equivalent of that little white line in your audio clips, but instead of for a clip, it's for the entire track. And then from there, we're going to click this little keyframe symbol on the track head, and that is going to enable automation. And from there, all we have to do is play our video, and we're going to move the slider when we need the volume to change, and it's going to record those movements so that when we play back, it'll all happen automatically, hence the name automation. When I think back to my childhood, you know what I remember the most? The summer. I would spend hours outside with my friends. It didn't matter what we were doing, as long as we were together. Granted, not everything we did was safe. I'm pretty sure that's a rock we're throwing around. Still, I wouldn't have traded that time for anything in the world. And there we go. Once we stop recording and we look at this, you'll see in the fader, we've got a whole bunch of little mini keyframes. These are all of our fader movements right here. There's a whole bunch of them. Every little shaky twitch of the mouse is recorded in there. But the cool thing is if we go back to the beginning and we play this, this slider is now going to move on its own. When I think back to my childhood, you know what I remember the most? The summer. Pretty cool, right? Before we move on to listening, let me just say this about automation. While it is a much less time-consuming way to control your volume than keyframing is, I would personally only do automation if you're using an actual mixing board. Otherwise, it can get kind of clunky when you're trying to bring your volume up and down, unless, of course, you're extremely gifted with a mouse. And with that, let's move on to listening, which is actually a more automatic process than automation is. Basically, listening is the process of using the dynamics from one track to tell the other track when to change the volume, which I know sounds confusing, but it's actually really easy. Let's take a look. Okay, real quick, before we actually get started with this, I made a horrible, embarrassing mistake that I'm sure you guys are gonna bash me about in the comments. That's fine, go ahead. This is not called listening, it's called sidechaining. That is the technical term for what we are doing. We are sidechaining. That will make sense in a minute, but first let me explain exactly what we're doing. We are setting up audio 2 to listen to audio 1. And so when Audio 2 gets a signal from Audio 1, which will happen whenever the playhead goes over one of these audio clips, it's going to bring down the volume of the music clip. Pretty cool, pretty simple to set up, but you don't get as much fine control over your volume as you do with keyframing and automation. Okay, with all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and send our signal from Audio 1 to Audio 2. We're going to do all of this in the Dynamics tool. So if we come over into our mixer, you'll see Dynamics. First thing we want to do is set up the Audio 1 dynamic. So we're going to mouse over our Audio 1 dynamics and we're going to double click. That's going to open our dynamics. And all we're going to do here is we're going to click send. And that's it. We're done with the dynamics in Audio 1. So we can go ahead and X out of that. And now we're going to open up our Audio 2 dynamics. Again, we're going to mouse over the dynamics box. We're going to double click. It's going to open it up. See, it says dynamics, music. Music is the name of the audio track. First thing we're going to do is turn our compressor on. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to come down here to where it says send and listen, and we're going to click listen. And now with our compressor at default settings and listen turned on, we can go ahead and play back and see what exactly is going on here. I warn you right now, this is going to sound horrible because we need to adjust some stuff. When I think back to my childhood, you know what I remember the most? The summer. See, that didn't really do anything, but if we bring our threshold down a little bit, let's maybe bring it down to -35 and we play that back again. When I think back to my childhood, you know what I remember the most? The summer. And if you were listening carefully, you probably heard the audio ducking a little bit, but whenever there was a pause in the speech, it would jump back up. That's where these settings right here, attack, hold, and release, come into play. What we're going to do is we want this to be kind of a slow fade when the dialogue starts. So we're going to bring our attack up. Let's go ahead and bring it up all the way. We're going to bring our hold up maybe around 800. And what that's going to do is it's going to keep our music from jumping up in between the pauses. And then we're going to bring our release up pretty far. And what that's going to do is make it so once the dialogue stops, it doesn't jump the music back up, but it'll be kind of a slow fade up. So with those settings going on, let's take a listen. When I think back to my childhood, you know what I remember the most? The summer. And that's pretty good, but I feel like the volume is still a little bit too high on the music while we're talking. Bring our threshold down. Get all the way down to 50 and see what happens. When I think back to my childhood, you know what I remember the most? The summer. I would spend hours outside with my friends. It didn't matter what we were doing, as long as we were together. And that sounds pretty good. Again, you're not going to get a lot of control over how much the volume is affected. You're not going to get a lot of control about your fade duration. You're just not getting a whole lot of control, but it does do the job. It does work. And if in certain situations, it sounds really good. Now, a quick pro tip, if you are going to be using sidechaining to do all of this, to do your volume control, and you're doing it with music, you want to make sure you're carving out space in your music so that your dialogue doesn't get swallowed up. I know that makes not a lot of sense, but let's open up our EQ and I'll show you what I mean. If we rid of dynamics. So we come into our mixer here and we go to our audio to EQ, double click that to open. Now, a lot of the human voice lives around that 1K frequency mark. So if we take our EQ and we open up band 4 and we put it to that 1K frequency and we drop it down, doesn't have to be too far, maybe around anywhere between -8 and -10 dB, you're gonna get a nice little area. So you're bringing the frequency down in the music so that your voice can shine through a little bit more. I'm gonna give you a quick before and after. Go ahead and start at the beginning of this clip and we'll turn off the EQ to start. I would spend hours outside with my friends. It didn't matter what we were doing as long as we were together. It was really subtle. Let's go ahead and listen to it again. I would spend hours outside with my friends. It didn't matter what we were doing as long as we were together. And there you go. So that's a little quick tip to when you're using sidechaining to make sure that your dialogue isn't getting swallowed up by your music. It's a really, really handy little tip. I do this. In fact, I have a preset in Fairlight that automatically does this on my music tracks so that my dialogue doesn't get swallowed up, so the music isn't super distracting and it doesn't affect the music a whole bunch, which is really, really nice. Oh, real quick, remember earlier when I said that you can use automation on more than just the volume of a track and how I said it was a topic for another video? Well, it turns out that I already made that video. You can check that out right here, and until next time, don't forget to go out and make stuff. Thanks for watching.